The best lawyers aren't found in the big law firms. They're found in the stories of those who left. All right, everyone. Today, I'm starting a little differently. I know I normally do a spiel and stuff, but before we started this one, Courtney gave me a little video to watch of our guest today, Nicole Rose. And in it, Nicole was explaining she loved to draw when she was much younger and sort of went away from that, started a law career, started her very successful career. But there was a moment during her sitting in on a client meeting and she realized instead of taking notes on the client meeting, she had started drawing the clients. So Nicole, firstly, welcome. And secondly, can you take me to that moment when you were in a client meeting being a lawyer, but started actually redrawing and retracing your childhood dreams?
Yes, I can. Thanks, Lofty. And what a great memory as well. So at the time, so this happened a number of times after this, but at the time, I'll tell you what happened. I was working at a law firm in the UK, in London at the time, called Cameron McKenna, CMS Cameron McKenna, which was a very large European law firm. And I had a training contract. No, I didn't. No, sorry, I did have a training contract there. Yeah, I was working as a trainee solicitor. And I was in a meeting on the top floor overlooking all of London. So you can imagine. Now, I was at the time like an ardent watcher of LA law. And I was like, oh, this is so cool. Look at all the nice fruits. You got this. Everyone's so, it's so great that I'm here. This is my dream. I've always wanted this. So, and I sat there listening to, thinking about construction. So construction law is very complicated. There are different stakeholders. Honestly, it was way over my head at the time. I remember thinking, this is way over my head. And I was trying to take as many notes as possible because the partner wanted me to be able to, follow up. So because I didn't understand a word of what they're talking about, I was just taking notes. And here's the thing. I thought I was just taking notes. Okay, I thought I was writing things down, but I ended up drawing the client. So I was like, okay, this is not okay. So I went back to my desk and looked through my notes and realized that I hadn't been taking all the notes I thought I had been taken. And there he was, the client, which was not very helpful for the quite scary partner. And that was kind of like, I guess, my first, and that was when I was, oh gosh, I was mid-20s then. And I'd stopped myself for many years from doing any more drawing because I'd gone to university. Instead of going to study art, I'd studied law. I then went to law school, continued to study law. There was a theme. I then went and got a training contract. There's another theme. Like I was definitely on the career of being a lawyer. And then suddenly I was looking down and my notes were drawings. And this would crop up quite a few times over my career, where I kind of quickly put on my, okay, let's be professional hat. I'm in LA law, remember, heels, suits. This is what I've always wanted. I'm working in London. Stick to the game plan, Nicole. And, but it kept on happening. And I was lucky enough actually to move from doing that very dry property construction law, thank goodness, into employment law, which is far more human.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, there's a lot more humans to draw at that point. But that was kind of cool because I had my own clients and it started to become more about people than about law. And I was enjoying it a lot more. But I still had that niggling feeling inside of me. I feel like I'm two people. I'm missing out on something.
Yeah. No, and that's why I knew it would be an amazing way to start the podcast, because I think, I'm sure, having spoken to so many lawyers do leave behind their, and whether, like, not everyone leaves it. Like, were you very conscious? Did you, like, when you started studying law, say, it's effectively, I'm putting, like, in your mind, childish things to bed. I'm not going to pursue
100%.
that. Yeah.
100%. I lived with
external
artists.
pressure, or was it just you decided yourself?
It was me. I went to university and I lived with artists, and I really felt it. I really felt that they were doing what they were doing and I was putting mine to bed. That was done. I wasn't going to be an artist. I was going to be a lawyer. And so I very deliberately stopped, and I felt very sad about it, but I didn't believe and this is all comes down to beliefs. Yeah, I didn't believe I could be successful being creative. I thought I needed to have a proper profession. And lovely, when you're young, you have all sorts of expectations of yourself, and then you've got the law firm expectations of you. So as a young lawyer, I was in the office very early, working till very late. I was going to, cap at 11 o'clock at night, home, getting into the office at 7 a.m. in the morning. We all did that, yeah. And you kind of think that's a rite of passage, and therefore you need to do that. Like that's what you need to do to be successful.
Yeah.
Not realizing that does not make you successful. That just makes you something that everyone else is doing or you think you should be doing. And this is why actually I do a lot of work in the community with younger lawyers, mentor lawyers, talk about creativity, run workshops, precisely for this reason, is that I want people to know that if only we could use it, there is another way.
Yeah. Well, and I think that creative side, like the law, as you said, is a human endeavor. And if there's one sort of fundamental thing that makes us different to every other species, it's our ability to create, to innovate. And so if you can bring it in, because otherwise if the law becomes actually black and white and like just what's written down the law without the creativity, because it's actually to provide holistic between human beings, like to provide civil society, that won't happen without creativity. And so that's why I'm like, you're right, it's such an important thing for people to learn, that you don't have to shut off who you are as a lawyer. Like you can do both. So in your career, like you obviously worked in some of the big firms and went through that grind, which is sort of the textbook rite of passage, as you said. Did you just sort of follow, this was a department you got a job in, so this was the area of law, and then progress, or were you strategic in how you decided what you were going to pursue?
Well, I started to become strategic. So when I went and did employment law, which I loved doing, I absolutely loved doing, that was the first time in my career when I really married something that I felt passionate about with something that I was doing. How great. And I was dealing with individuals as well. So it was a small niche employment law in the city of London, and they had really good, I guess, high level, high net worth employee clients, and also some broking houses and smaller companies. So I got to kind of experience both sides, but a lot of it was working very closely with individuals who's like, when they lost their job, they didn't just lose their job. It's not like they're going to go and get another similar job. They lost their career. They lost their livelihood. They lost the way that they recognize themselves, their status. So much came into it in terms of human nature, what they were going through. It was just, I started to see people unraveling, and it became very personal. And I enjoyed it. I felt like I was making a difference. But I started to become strategic because I realized that I was acting, I was in the High Court, and I was dealing with some really interesting corporate issues for a company we were working with. But I wanted to do more company issues, but I wanted to be involved. This is the difference. I wanted to be a decision maker. I didn't want to be sitting there advising. I wanted to actually be going, this is what we're doing, and this is how we're going to carry it through. Like, this is how we're going to start to make a difference. And so I went to go and work in-house at a large insurance company in the UK called Aon. Very large, they're global. And I started doing employment law, but I realized quite well within an investigation that I uncovered, I realized there's a lot more to an organization than just dealing with HR and employment issues. And I actually was involved in one of the first it was the FSA, then now the FCA investigation into bribery and corruption allegations in the UK. And that was the company that I was working at, all public now, so I can talk about it. It became a DOJ investigation. Here's what I saw, and I realized how amazing my career could be if I got this right, is that I saw that organizations weren't going to change or do the right thing because you had a policy in place, because a lawyer told you this is what you should be doing. Yeah, that's not how people work. This was an organization and an industry that had been working a certain way for so many years. And clearly it wasn't working. The processes and policies and governance in place was not working. it wasn't just for this organization, any organization. And I realized that in order to become a decision maker, part of the solution, if I worked in compliance and financial crime, firstly, it's very interesting. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think anything could get meatier, and I did get some very meaty cases in employment law, but this was, really interesting. So I did strategically say, I want to move over to this side. I actually think I can add more value. I remember going to the global head of HR, and I think even the CEO at the time, and said, I want to do this role. And they're like, okay, we'll put you in this role then. Good.
Yep.
So that was good. And so I moved from being the employment lawyer, the legal counsel, to the compliance counsel. And realized
at that time, was that a dedicated role in the organization, or was it something you were like, hey, maybe we need this type of role, having gone through what you just went through?
They had a compliance department. They didn't have a dedicated role in the UK, and I felt that they needed it. So that was good. And that gave me a tremendous amount of experience. And I really enjoyed it. But what I enjoyed most was just going, well, how can we future-proof this? How can we turn what isn't working into something that will work? Because I don't want to see, and unfortunately there were people involved, and there was people were arrested. It was not nice. And I was like, I don't think anybody should have to go through this ever. So, and having come from a space of dealing with the human element and really enjoying that, I found myself again dealing with that element, but this time at an organizational level, thinking, well, not how can we improve the life of one person who's lost their career, but how can we improve the life of an organization so this doesn't happen? That, because you know what, Lofty, the people that were getting into trouble, losing their jobs, getting arrested, they didn't get much money from it. They weren't earning the millions from it. They were just doing their job. They were just following leadership. Okay.
That's what I was going to ask, because that's it. Even when you said the policies are in place, when there's a policy in place, if someone in leadership is willing to break it, therefore it gives permission to the rest of the organization, perhaps lower, to go, well, yes, I know you follow the rules and they should follow the rules, but if so-and-so is not following the rules, that's amazing.
So there was a line that I heard at that time in my career, and the line was as follows: the bigger the bribe, the better the broker. So that was, now we now know, and I've done a lot of research into this myself, but we now know there's so many research studies to show the power of influence, the power of following somebody else. Like, why do we look on Instagram at somebody who's eating a certain food or got abs in a certain way? Like, what does this person do? What do they do to get to where they got to go to? What makeup do they wear? I will say that I'm not huge in Instagram follower, more LinkedIn, but you know the point. And so we are very influenced by what people do. The group mentality is something that we will follow. So using, I guess, you work in this world where you get to look at behavior science, you get to look at, people, what they do, why they do it. I got terribly involved and interested and curious about, I wonder if I could apply this to my work more. Like, I wonder how we can use these insights and creativity and apply it to the work that I'm doing. And that is where I would say my journey to Australia came.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. Is obviously a lot in the UK, but you're now Australian based. So how did that come about?
Well, I came to Australia. So I was working in what ended up being a very big role, and took up a lot of my time working in financial crime and compliance. And I took some time off. I had a sabbatical. I went to Italy, tried to learn Italian. I learned a little bit, not enough. My only time of flunking out of a course, I flunked out of a university, but I ended up staying there and living by myself and actually learning Italian by myself, which was great. And then Aon, who I was working with, said, look, did you want to go and head up this big team in Chicago? And I thought long and hard about it, and I thought I would say yes. I was almost sure I'd say yes. But at the end of the day, I said no. And they said, okay, did you want to work from the UK, heading up this big team, and then just come to Chicago when we need you? And once again, I thought I'd say yes. I was absolutely sure that I would say yes to this phenomenal opportunity. But again, I said no. And at the time...
dig into, do you remember what went into that? Because that's two massive
It was
moments
too
to
massive.
say no.
It was too massive. And I remember I had a friend who said to me, "What are you doing?" And I say thank goodness for this friend, I think. And I did just start to think about my life. And I was 35 and I thought, what will become of my life if I'm a traveling person? If I travel as a lawyer, like, will I have a family? Will I have everything that I really want in life? And at the same time, I ended up going to Australia for a 2-week holiday for a friend's brother's wedding. And so I went there and I must have known something. Yeah. Because I did buy myself an open ticket. So I must have known, like, I bought myself a more flexible, it wasn't open, it was flexible. So it could be open. So I thought I think at the time I spent an extra £500 and got a more flexible ticket. Who knows what was going through my head, but something. So I went to Australia on 2-week holiday, and let's just say I ended up staying.
Yeah.
I just never came home. I ended up really meeting the part of me that had been hidden for so many years, and found and ended up enrolling in a diploma of fine art in Melbourne.
Yeah.
Which was phenomenal. And I said, okay, that's it. No more law. That's it. I'm no longer a lawyer. I'm now an artist. So, and
you're
bearing
very,
in mind,
I was going to say you're very definitive to go, I can be
I was,
one or I can do the other.
yeah, at the time I was very, very different. I was like, well, that's
Yep.
it. That's because obviously working in London, huge amount of stress, working on big cases, high expectations, big rewards, you fall into a trap quite easily.
Yep.
And so I think I mean, midlife crisis, whatever was happening, it happened. But I loved what I was doing. And I guess the way that I look at it is I swapped my convertible car for the true convertible, a bicycle, a real bicycle, pedals, which I still have and still ride to this day. I guess I thought of myself as studying, and that's what I did. And then around 6 months into that, two things happened. A friend that I was working with, I was at law school, art school with, said, "What are you doing for the rest of your life?" And I said, "Well, I don't know." He said, "Well, look, Nicole, everyone has a way of earning money. You're a lawyer. Don't forget that." And at the same time as that conversation happened, a friend contacted me from my old role in the UK and said, "Hey, I'm now working at this company, this rather large mining company. Have you ever heard of Rio Tinto? I'm working there. They've just lost 2 of their compliance people. They really need some help. I told them about you and the work you've done. They're really interested in speaking to you." So I said, "Oh, well, that doesn't really go with my whole art student thing." But I went and met the then global head of compliance, who was absolutely lovely. And he ended up saying, "Look, can you help us out? Carry on doing your art, but help us out."
Yep.
So what transpired was that I ended up working with them, and they wanted to hire me as an employee. And I said, "Look, I've just moved to Australia on my own back. I'm just starting to figure myself out. I don't know." And they said, "Well," I said, "Look, I'd love to think about how I could have my own business." And they said, "Great, can we be your first client?" And then what happened was they just gave me one of the first piece of work they gave me was code of conduct training. So I took what I loved and was learning and was figuring out for myself around digital skills and animation. I started building some small animations for them. So instead of a long 45-minute training, I'd turn it into a 3-minute training, just to experiment, basically, because it was fun for me. And was just experimenting with different programs. People ended up loving it. And they said, "Hey, how about you just take on global compliance training for us?"
Yep.
So that's what I did. I took my love of art and a fairly good writer and script writing and started recreating all this training and turning it into, and then they asked me to go around the world and deliver the training face to face, which was great for me because that also involved a lot of creativity, a lot of public speaking, which I love doing. I love influencing people in the right way. And so I got this phenomenal client, Rio Tinto, and started off my career. Well, I restarted my career having combined both my love of arts and creativity, and also let's change the world and make it a better place.
Amazing. And that's for a genesis of a business as well. That's like I tell anyone, a business is about see a need, fill a need. That's for me, the
Yeah.
definition of entrepreneurship is see a need, fill a need. And then you build the entrepreneurial part is building the business structure around it to monetize it, make sure it's viable long-term. That's an amazing way to start. And so you basically from that haven't really looked back. That's been your self-employment journey?
It has. So what I did was there's a little tweak in between. I'll talk about that. So I carried on doing that for a number of years. At one point, I did start to think, when my first son was born, I did start to think, hey, I don't want to be traveling as much. And I wasn't very fulfilled with training. I started to think there's a bit of a gap here. Like, it's good, education is great, but it's just not enough. And bearing in mind, I came from, I guess, a strong legal and compliance background. I was just starting to feel I wanted to do more. And at the time, I was offered, I saw a role in Sydney and for the Uniting Church in Australia. And at the time, we just had the Royal Commission.
I was going to say, yeah.
Yeah, which is into institutional responses to child abuse. And there was a role in compliance, building a culture of compliance for the Uniting Church. And it was it had 300 congregations. It was a really large, complex beast. And they met me and really liked me and liked my ideas. And so I went and worked with them for a couple of years. And it had twofold. It had a kind of two parts of the role. Number one was managing the claims process and dealing with what the fallout of what happened over the years in entities that the Uniting Church were responsible for. But it also had the culture entities, and it was a really cool role in lots of ways, because what it had around 300 different entities that were all separate legal entities. So the word influence became such an important role. I had to build a compliance program that I couldn't tell people they had to use. I had to inspire and influence people to want to use.
Yeah.
Which by the way, when it comes to child safety, you've got a very good message, but still it was definitely a challenge. Very, very, very proud of the work that I did there, and set up the child safety unit and did a lot of stuff that I think has and will make a difference in our society. After a couple of years doing that with another child as well, it was just getting a little bit personal for me, and I knew that I needed to step away. So I think so what I did was I decided that I needed to go to a world that was less personal, and went into work with Rabobank. Actually, I went to go and work in banking, and did some work with Rabobank and Westpac, and so that, although I will say the work I ended up doing related to vulnerable customers, so I was still dealing with humans, still dealing with the people element. But what I was getting more involved in was actually the program implementation rather than just the training. I did the training as well, but I was then starting to build a career, which I'm now doing. I've done ever since, on looking at program implementation. How do you build frameworks? What do the frameworks need to have? What does effectiveness look like? What do the regulators want to see? Well, what does the organization want to see? How can we report better? How can we capture information better? What can we do to show that this actually works in practice, so that we're not looking at it from, oh, we've got a checklist approach for the policy. We've got this is how the policy actually works, which is, so I kind of rebuilt my career from, I guess, legal to financial crime investigation, to training and education and communication, to program implementation and program development, which is what I now do. So I now run global compliance programs and look at how can we implement something that actually works in an organizational context.
Yeah. And I'm very curious about this because you've done it from such the top echelon, like being in the boardrooms where they're making the decisions on here's the policies. And then you've effectively gone, well, okay, we need the policies. Now we need to train the people. So you come up with the fun way of training people. And then, well, it's not just they can watch it once because they'll forget about it and they'll go watch something else. How do we implement it? So you've literally done top to bottom. My question on that is, where do you find the hardest, because you have to speak a different language to each person. CEOs and that sort of thing, they are responsible to shareholders. So they do have to have a bottom line. There's got to be a profitable reason to implement things, and also brand perception. But then as it goes down, each person's incentive to implement the stuff you're talking about Where have you found the most difficulty doing that?
So I will answer that by saying where I have found the most difficulty is where I've had the greatest success.
Yep. So you take on the
Always,
hardest challenge.
always,
Yeah.
always.
Yeah.
And we always want the hardest challenge, yeah?
Yeah.
Like we want to have conflict. We want to have people who don't like stuff because you know what? It's actually better when people are opposed to what you're doing because at least they have an opinion.
Yep.
The worst thing that you can possibly have is apathy.
Yep.
You know, most, and this is how I look at an organization. Now, I say this for organizations that don't have compliance as a literal requirement to do your job. So if you work in the financial services, in order to move forward, you have to go through certain compliance parameters. You've got to go through AML, which is extremely strict, and due diligence, et cetera, et cetera. But let's take an organization outside of that, a normal corporate organization, where they don't have to do things in order to fulfill their role. They don't have to disclose a conflict of interest. They don't have to report to wrongdoing. They don't have to report a benefit they've received or given. We want them to, yeah? But they don't have to report if they see potential fraud. So what we want to do is we want to change the culture of an organization where people actually see the benefit of doing those things. And the way that I look at an organization, I haven't, and this is extremely general, but the biggest risk you have in an organization and are the people who are, you've got kind of usually four, I use say 4 types of compliance users. You've got number 1, which is the person who are very invested, like the board and the leadership, or anybody who is in a sustainability or a kind of a ESG, compliance, legal, they're all invested, yeah? And then you've also got the people that are users, immediate users of our compliance systems. You've got somebody who is about to get a board directorship and needs to disclose that as a potential conflict of interest. Yeah, you've got somebody who wants to be able to go to or offer a particular sporting event to a client or go to a sporting event. They know that they can't get away with it without disclosing. You've got people who are active users. In the analogy of buying a car, you've got somebody who's ready to buy the car. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, the thing is, Lofty, those people within an organization are probably at the top 5%. Yeah. They're not everybody. They're a small section of people. And then you've got people who are going to be doing it at some point in the future. Some people who would go, I know that I'm about to be offered a board role, or I know that something's going to happen over the next 3 months. I better know about this. Yeah. Those people are quite few and far between as well. Maybe you've got another 10%. Yeah. So what we then have is we look at an organization, you've got about 20% of people who I believe, or I've seen in practice, who are what I would say compliance users. They're either going to use it now or they're going to use it later. I'm going to buy a car now or I'm going to buy it in the next six months. Yeah. Yeah. But then you've got everybody who don't even think they need a new car. You've got people who either don't know what they need to do or quite frankly don't care. And that to me is the biggest challenge. So it's not the challenge where people are opposed to what I'm talking about. It's the challenge where people just don't care, or they just don't listen, or they just don't understand, or quite frankly, they are so overwhelmed by how much compliance they have to do. They don't know where to start. Yeah. Like, why bother learning a new system? Like, it's just, if I don't know it's there, I won't deal with it. I don't have to report that conflict of interest. So I would say that I have had the greatest, go back to my point, my greatest success is when people oppose what I'm doing, because at least they're interested. Our greatest challenge is when people go, yeah, but that doesn't really apply to me. And that is usually a larger population that we then need to really start working with. Yeah. And that's actually the population that most organizations don't focus on. We focus on our sale. Like, you think about it from a selling perspective, we're selling to people we think want our services. Yeah. And that's what we're told, aren't we? We're saying, like, don't advertise to everyone, speak to the people that actually want you. But when it comes to an organization, you don't have that luxury. Yeah. So what you need to do is, or what we need to do is, we need to be able to speak to different people using different messaging and different language. Like, so it's not overwhelming. we can actually, and the way that I think is the best way to do this is to be able to identify the different types of people that we're speaking to, the different demographics, and know that these people will surprise you. Like I have been at a, I've done training before for a group of people who I thought were, who were deep in operations. They were on the ground. They weren't dealing with procurement. They weren't dealing with direct risks. They were the one building and manufacturing. Yeah, they're actually. However, when I went to go and do some training with them, and I said, "Hey, just to let you know, there is this policy here on bribery and corruption. These are the risks that we're looking at. As it happens, you're, I think, you know, in terms of what you do and what you need to know, this is relevant, but this probably isn't relevant to your role." And I had one person who said, "You know what? I actually really want to know what's happening in my organization. I know that I don't deal with people. I know I don't deal with town planners and government officials myself, but I really want to know what other people are doing. And I really want to know about this." And I was like, okay, that was a surprise that I will never, you know, that I will learn from. And we spent the next hour, and I never thought I'd be training them on something that didn't relate to their role. So I guess that's a story that people can surprise you. Be prepared for anything, and try and speak to their level and find out what their level is.
Well, and it reminds me, as you were explaining it all, it reminds me which I'm sure you've heard, it's a parable or like a story I've heard so many people talk about, but there's one man on one side of a building laying bricks, and he's drudgery, and he shows up at 9 o'clock, finishes at 5, and he lays 1 brick a day. What do you do? I lay bricks. And there's a man on the other side of the building laying bricks, and ask him, he shows up early, he goes late, he's just full of life, loving what he does. What do you do? I'm building a cathedral to this big, immense, massive structure that's going to change the world. It's going to house the homeless, it's going to do all these things. Both men performing the same job, but showing them that vision. And I think someone like you in those organizations, as you said, to show the 80% who they're just doing their checklist, their job, whether that's building something, running through the forms, doing it. But if you can show them the vision, as Simon Sinek says, the why, like what is this organization, an organization like Rio Tinto, which affects so many people, like from the shareholders who aren't directly connected to the hundreds of thousands, if not millions of employees, the decisions in there. And if you can be inside that organization making a change and part of an organization that you can be proud to say, actually, we power the world, because yes, we dig up the coal and we're trying to do it in a sustainable way, and we're trying to do it in a long term. Like the change on an organization that I can see taking people from apathy to empowerment in the sort of stuff you're talking about, like purely on the bottom line of the profitability, that would be huge. Do you now, like when you go into organizations, do you try and say effectively, give me the people who don't care or don't want to do it, and build it from the ground up? Because as you said, the board's pretty much on board from day dot.
Yeah, I actually, my methodology stems from, let's look at what we as an organization want to achieve and what's going to get in the way. There's always what is the risk? Like, so what is, you know, a risk is always, what is it that what's the outcome we want to have, and what's the risk of us achieving that outcome? And that's a really good question to ask. You know, what is it that's going to stop us from getting this? Now, if I have a board or leadership who wants to invest in a culture of compliance, they say, look, or they want to go public and they know they need to get a good compliance program in place, or they've just had investigation or an audit or whatever, and they're being asked lots of questions. There's clearly some kind of appetite, which is great. So then we need to say, well, what is actually getting in the way of us being able to perform, to do the role that you've asked me to do? And I'll do, you know, look at the risk of an organization. Often by asking some questions, you can often ascertain what it is. I would say 9 times out of 10, and this is something that the international compliance standards and regulations focus on, and the Department of Justice focuses on, is the real risk they see in an organization is not the leadership. It's not even the employees. It's the people in between. It's the middle managers. And they are often the people that are most overlooked. They have the most work. They have the most exposure. If something goes wrong, they're like to get sacked. They also have the most influence over employees.
Yeah.
So often I find that when you're building a program, and once you've defined what you want to do and all the parameters around it, the most immediate challenge to overcome and risk to overcome is to ensure that the people on the ground who should be delivering your message, and we call them line one, are the ones that we are partnering with, supporting, communicating, educating, influencing, getting them to be our advocate. That's who we really want to aim at. And then a lot of that kind of 80% of the population, I'm not saying it's dealt with, but at least we have a conduit to it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. Well, on that topic, how have you, like, on an actual personal level, how do you take someone from apathy? And the reason I'll share this to share something personal is my father went to prison for blowing the whistle. He was mayor of a government organization, and the entire way through, we knew why they were going after him, because he tried to expose bribery and corruption. And he was himself offered bribes. And when he said no, effectively the machine turned on him, said, well, you can either get on board or end up in prison. And now he did. And it took 4 or 5 years to go through that journey. And I remember the lawyers at the time telling me, don't worry, like, everyone's just doing their job. And all the way up to him being handcuffed and let out of the courtroom, everyone did their job. And the reason it hit me so hard is I realized at that point, apathy and everyone just following a checklist can lead to the most honest man I knew going to prison. And everyone just did their job. No one did anything wrong. Like, from the bailiff to the judge, they just followed the thing, the prosecutor, it was all following it. And I realized apathy, as you said, is one of the most dangerous things, because the standards people walk by are the standards they accept. And because Dad decided this isn't okay, I'm the mayor, I'm going to make a change, but just fiercely the machine turned on him. How do you actually take someone from apathy to, hey, your job, even though it feels small, you need to step up. When you see something wrong, you need to step up, because every little point in that chain, I saw one person could have just stepped up and gone, this is wrong. This shouldn't be happening. But no one did, because they all did their own job. So
here's how I look at it, manage it, and roll out programs to prevent that from happening. This is what I did. And I'll give the analogy of running a marathon. Okay. Let's say I say to you, are you a runner, Lofty?
No, I was in the past. I was a soccer player, but not for a while.
Okay. So if I said to you, hey, in 8 weeks' time, for charity, a wonderful charity, I will give you $1 million if you run the marathon. So you've got 8 weeks to prepare for a marathon. What would you be thinking about? Like, I've given you an incentive, but you need to run, which would, I say 26 miles. I think that's 52 Ks or something like that. Yeah. You got 50. So from 0 to 52 Ks, and you have to run it. Can't walk it. What would you think?
Well, my brain, and this is the analytical, I go, I'm literally straight out the door to see how far I can run before I just deal. And that's my ground zero. And then I go, all right, I'd actually calculate, okay, I did 5K and I absolutely tanked myself. Now, tomorrow I'll try and do 6, and I'd work it out back. That's how I'd do it. Work it out back one little increment at a time to get to the 52.
So you would get there possibly. Now, I've given you a great incentive. How about I didn't give the incentive $1 million? If I just said, look, in 8 weeks' time, I dare you to run 52 Ks.
Not as much, because I'd look at my calendar and go, no, not as good an incentive.
Okay. How about if I said to you, every day, Lofty, over the next 3 months, I would like you to walk for half an hour a day. What would you say?
Right now, I'd say yes, because we're trying to get into some more exercise.
Excellent. Most people could achieve half an hour of walking a day. Yeah. And then what might happen is at one point you might go, I've walked a bit. I might start doing a little bit of running with the walking. Yeah. I might start, I could maybe do 5 minutes, maybe, a week later I could do 10 minutes. That half an hour of walking might gradually, depending, you might not want to, but it could turn into a jog. It could turn into a run. Yeah. And you then might start doing it for more. You might start doing walk runs for an hour. Yeah. That is achievable. What's not achievable is getting up the next day, however much the incentive, and just changing everything that you do. To go from somebody that never reported to somebody that reported is a massive ask for anybody.
Yeah.
It's just not what human nature is designed to do. Our bodies are not designed to run without practicing, and our mind is not designed to change its mind and change everything it's done and all the behaviors that it knows just because someone tells you to. Yeah. However well-meaning, however much the incentive is. And I've done a lot of work with a lot of organizations. I've asked a lot of, hundreds of workshops where I've done, I would say, my own research on this and asked these questions. So this is what I think we can do in this situation, is that we don't ask people to suddenly become a reporter when they never would have reported. And because the truth is, Lovely, that people don't report, and what people have told me, they don't report for different reasons. They don't report because they think they get into trouble. They don't report because they think nothing will happen. They don't report because they don't have the time. They don't report because they don't want to get someone into trouble. Yeah. So people don't just change because you tell them to. There's those issues. But here's what they might do. How about you turn around and say, in meetings, we're going to get a lot more used. I'm a manager, and my job as a manager is to get people more used to speaking up, even, questioning me. I want to get people in an environment where they are more used to using their voice.
Yeah.
They see that I encourage feedback. On the bottom of my signature, I ask for feedback. In our meetings, I say, hey, I've got this idea, please push back. Within the meeting, within my values of my team, I design values around questioning, arguing, pushing back, checking, etc., etc. Now, if I were to have a metric in place, which would then encourage people to act in a certain way, to have a behavior that they get used to exercising, just like the walking to the running, when you say, we really need people to be speaking up about things that are going wrong in this particular area of the business, if you see it, people are more likely to speak up. So what we want to do is we want to give people something that is an activity that is very achievable. I don't want to give people an activity that they believe is against their own integrity, their ethics, their way of being, their behaviors, their entire life. And the culture that we are dealing with often, and I don't know about your dad's environment, but I've worked in environments in Asia where it's disrespectful to be able to, it's not the right thing to be able to question. There's many stories that we hear about pilots, pilot number 2, who, the plane has crashed and people have died because they're too scared to speak up. So we need to understand that the people in our organizations they need to start with baby steps. And how do we give them baby steps? And so, for example, I'll give you one example that I'm using right now. I would like to encourage more people to think about conflicts of interest as being something that they might need to disclose. Let them think about things so that we've got more of an idea as an organization. I believe that there are not enough people who understand what they need to disclose. You know what I'm getting the people to do? And I can measure this. I can actually track what people are doing. I'm asking people to go to the system, that, by the way, people don't know about. So I'm telling people there's a system. Go to the system, log into the system, and give me feedback on how simple you think the system is to use. That's it. Now, I haven't yet had the result of that piece of work that I'm asking teams to do and capture. But I have a strong guess that I'm going to get a number of disclosures as a result of that between now and the next 6 months. I haven't told people to disclose. I've told people to think. I've just told people to check. I said, I'll go and look at the system, and in the system there'll be a definition of what a conflict of interest is, etc., etc. Go and look at the different headings. Go and see how easy it is to use. Give me feedback on the functionality. That's it.
Yep.
So I've got them used to using the system. I've got them knowing there's a system, and I've got them thinking about conflicts of interest.
Yeah.
I've got them walking before they run. I'm not asking them to run a marathon. I'm just asking them to go for a gentle walk. That is the difference, I believe. And that's how we take apathy and we turn it into behavior.
Yeah. It's those micro rewards along the way, because any behavior that's rewarded, or a behavior that, as you said, if they're afraid of retribution, it's just as powerful as a treat and a reward, or in fact, sadly, more powerful is the fear of retribution. So that's chip away at it slowly but surely.
And also, if I were to have a leadership board and say, hey, here's the amount of people in the team who have actually logged on to the system and given me feedback, and here's the amount of people who haven't, I'm more likely to encourage people to give me the feedback. You're in this top 3% that haven't done it, or the top 10%, or whatever it is. Yeah. Again, there's a lot of research on this. If you want to know, like a really, really, really cool piece of research that was done pre-COVID, just to kind of prove my point, is there's a hospital in New York, and it was before COVID, so there was not the hand washing that we now have. But there was, there's requirements that every time a medical, somebody who was a member of staff, medical team walked into a room and left the room, they had to wash their hands.
Mm-hmm.
Thank goodness. We hope it happens in this hospital. It was not happening. They put cameras in, nanny cams in, and they said, look, there's a nanny cam in each room, and you are asked, you have to follow the process of washing hands coming in, washing hands coming out. Now, Lovely, how many people do you think started to wash their hands when they knew the nanny cam was there?
I'm assuming a lot more when they thought they're being watched.
No.
Was it still low?
It still stayed low.
Whoa.
Human nature.
No, that's
human nature.
Yeah.
You know why? Because nobody was doing it. Well, no one does it.
Yeah.
It's just a waste of time. So you know what the hospital did? Like, well, that didn't work. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot more conversations than that. I'm sure a lot of expletives were used, but that didn't work. So what they did was they put in, I don't know how they did the technology, but they put in a digitized board outside the main areas of all the rooms. So where there's a ward, there's a board. And on the board, it had on it the following. So as soon as you washed your hands, the camera would say, and the board would go, and a little sign would go out saying, thank you so much for washing your hands. You are now X% of people that wash their hands. Guess how much? Now, the hand washing went from 15% to how much do you think?
I'm assuming 80s to 90s, and then eventually it would get, there'd be probably maybe 3% less who just decide I'm just going to be anti everyone else.
Exactly. It went all the way up to 80-90%.
Yeah.
I think it nearly got to 90%. Yeah. Look at that. So all people needed was to hear that they're part of the solution. Thank you so much. They got a reward. They got a thank you.
Yep.
You're part of the solution. You're part of the 80-90% of people who wash their hands today.
Yeah.
Great job.
And it's
they could
thinking
that.
setting that new baseline, isn't it? To say,
it's
the croc brain, we all go, we survive in groups. Human beings have survived in tribes for thousands of years. And we go, if the group's doing it, then it's safe to do it. If the group's breaking the rules, it's safe to do it. But also if the group's washing their hands, that's the safe thing to remain part of the group. That's amazing.
And that's why I love working in organizations, because when you get to change a culture, like, that's really exciting. People don't forget that. I mean, I've got so many stories. We don't have time today, but to me, the work that I do is so important because it can actually change lives. Like hand washing changed lives. It does.
Yep.
Human rights programs, bribe and corruption programs, terrorism finance and AML programs, anti-modern slavery programs. They have even anti-tax facilitation programs, anti-fraud programs. They have a real impact on society, the communities that we work and live in. And I believe really strongly that the organizations can play a really great part in improving our society, even improving the laws, even improving, the policies that are driving the laws. We can really be part of that solution. And therefore, we will be better. We will be more efficient, more cost effective. We will drive more business by doing this. So there's so many good things about, I guess, amazing things that come out of the work that I believe we do in legal and compliance. And I think, when we have the opportunity to make that change across thousands of people, that's exciting.
Yeah. Well, and I'm sure there'll be future podcasts because there's many more topics. But the one question I do have to ask, and I ask everyone, I know you've been in the league a couple of months. Your thoughts so far on the Self-Employed Lawyers League? I know you've been to a few meetings, but I guess you know what the vision of it is. What are your thoughts around it?
Well, as I've shared before, I really love the idea of having people that come together to support each other and provide a better environment for clients. I believe that when we work independently by ourselves, just focusing on ourselves, we will only get so far. And it's actually why I joined it. I believe very, very, very much in community, however we can find a community. And then having the opportunity to build a community that will improve all of our lives, I think it's a no-brainer. And, you know, even just the few months that I've been here, I can see that I mean, I've already had some great ideas that I'm starting to put into practice, which have been extremely helpful. And I think just knowing that either there's someone else going through what you're going through, or they've been through it, or there's a greater, there's greater power, because actually we can work together and we can not only refer each other, but we can be part of a solution. So if the client needs employment law, financial crime advice, risk advice, compliance, we can actually provide that. We don't need to be a massive firm to provide that, and provide it really well. You know what? And provide it in a way that's not, I guess, the norm of how the legal system operates. We can do it better. We can provide a strategy for an organization, even including the pricing model, that's actually going to be something that makes a lot more sense for their business, and maybe gives us a lot more business. So maybe you don't charge by the hour, you charge by the project, but you get ongoing work that makes it a really great client to have, rather than just trying to get your, you know, okay, I can charge $800 an hour and get as much as I possibly can right now. Maybe we say we're in it for the long term with you. And I love that opportunity, and I look forward to exploring that a lot more with you.
No, and it's amazing. And even me and Courtney are surprised the level of not just intellect, but the companies that we're all now connected to through this collective of solo, like effectively self-employed lawyers. And I think it is pretty cool for us every week to see small groups and everything, but to see people opening up going, actually, wow, we can start to have an effect as if we were a big law firm without ever becoming one, simply by the philosophy of the rising tide lifting all boats, working together, individually, but collectively.
Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing. Well, what's the best way, because we'll make sure we put this in the show notes, for someone, an organization or an individual to reach out to you and get in touch?
Oh, fantastic. Well, there's my website, untoldcompliance.com. So you can hop on there and you'll see all my contact details. My LinkedIn, you can put that in the show notes. And I will put my my email address, nicole@untoldcompliance.com as well. So,
Perfect.
but you know what? I have to say, if you head over to LinkedIn, you're always going to find me there. I'm always posting or sharing, or my newsletter, or my podcast. I've got a podcast called the 8 Mindsets podcast as well. And often I get to sit in your role, Lofty, and interview some phenomenal people and get to share that. So look out for that as well.
No, fantastic. Thank you very much. And I'm sure it'll be the first of many.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me.